Everyone. Just a quick information. We're just waiting until all of the attendees have joined the room. I see there's a couple of them in the waiting room right now. So we'll start in about 2 to 3 minutes. Hi and welcome everyone again. Also those of you who just joined. Welcome to our webinar today together with Luis from Chemers and my colleague Margarita, a mining solutions expert. I think most of you have joined now and I think we're ready to start. Our webinar today is going to be about the best practices and some case studies about innovations in cyanidation. And our guest speaker today, as I just mentioned, is going to be Luis Neiser. Just before we start, we have done a quick poll just to get an idea where you're all joining from and what you're doing. And the first question was how you found out about our webinar today, and most of you found out about LinkedIn, which is great because we put a few infos out there, so it's good to see that it worked. And geographically, most of you are joining from the Americas today, and yeah, we have quite an equal split between technical background in metallurgy and business, which is great. And yeah, the big majority of all of you today have good experience with cyanide monitoring and control, which is, I think, a great opportunity to discuss these case studies and experiences today. With that, I would like to go to the next slide. So our today's agenda is going to be that I'm first going to introduce Luis, who's going to give an overview of his role at Chemours and Chemours' role as one of the leading cyanide suppliers in the world. Also, some insights on what the best practices are in terms of improving the cyanidation process. And lastly, he's going to talk about 3 cases working with our technology in the field. And at the end of that, our colleague Margarita will give you a bit of an overview of how our technology works and how you can start working with it. For those of you who haven't joined one of our webinars already, the way it works, if you want to ask questions, there's a small button on the bottom of the Zoom application titled Q&A, and there you can submit your questions during the entire webinar, and we'll take them up at the end and we'll try to answer all of them. With that, I would like to introduce Luis. So Luis works as a technical account representative for Chemours Mining Solutions. We're particularly excited for this webinar today because Luis and I have been working together for quite some time already. Also, we have been to a couple of mines together in the Americas. Luis' main focus is creating the most value for Chemours mining clients. And we're really happy to have him because besides his engineering background, Luis has a lot of experience in various fields of the mining and cyanide industry. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Luis. Yeah, very curious to hear you talk today.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I appreciate the invitation to kind of share our experience in Chemours with the technology. Also, I'm thankful for the photo. I have gained some weight in this couple of months, but okay, we will share our experience. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So just a quick background of who Chemours is. Chemours, we define ourselves as a different kind of chemical company. We are built upon a 200 years old legacy and a world-class product portfolio. And Mining Solutions, the cyanide business, is the largest producer of solid sodium cyanide worldwide. We have a production capability of 110,000 metric tons, and we are expanding our capabilities to meet this increasing demand for this product. We have been an industry leader for more than 65 years in the safe and reliable supply of sodium cyanide. And this leadership was built upon 4 main pillars. The first one is seamless supply. We have multiple terminals across the Americas to serve our customers, being that northern in Tejucon in Canada or all the way south to the Patagonia in Argentina. We also have capabilities to serve other regions across the world. The second one is the commitment to safety. As you know, cyanide is no game, and we take this product serious and with respect. We care for the safety of our product, communities, and environment, all the way up from our production facilities and terminals to the supply to to the mines around the continent, and even we work with our customers to maintain the operation safe at their facilities. We have a team focus 100% in the product stewardship area. So that's the second pillar. The third pillar is dedicated support. We have a great team all the way from customer service to operations to supply and our technical account representatives. Main role of all this area and the customer-centric mindset is understand the needs of the customers and the priorities. That's also something key. Understand the needs, but also the priorities. And the last one is the constant innovation. And this is the purpose of the collaboration with companies as Cyanogen. We aim to work with great technologies, reliable equipments, and together with our expertise to drive continuous improvement at our customer sites. So as the gold and silver production grows, the need for mining operation to run efficiently and consistently grows with it, and we are committed to that. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, just a quick background. Cyanide, as you know, is a well-known reagent in the mining industry. It has been used now for about more than 100 years. The chemistry is complicated. It's just like that. It has a lot of different effects when you have ore with different characteristics. So the chemistry of of cyanide is complicated, but still is the most cost-effective solution to process simple and complex ores. And well, as you know, we have a lot of people from mine side. Its consumption ratio is a critical metric for ore processing plants. If you add too much cyanide, obviously you will have high cost in reagents, not only cyanide, but detox agents, anti-crusting, etc. And if you add too little cyanide, you will have low recoveries. Mhm. This results that on average, the cyanide cost at a mine represents between 6 to 10% of the total cash cost of a mine. Obviously, there are mines that this number is lower, but there are mines that this number is higher, right? And as you can see in the graph in the right, the cyanide consumption has grown significantly in the last 10 years. This graph is from 2008 to 2018. And this is what driven by what we at Chemours call the grade ore complexity effect, right? Ore gets to be more complex now, lower grades, so you will need more cyanide, right? So as I say, year over year, the ore gets more complex, the grades get lower. This is a challenge for the mines, and obviously they need more cyanide to recover the same amount of gold and silver. But is it really so? That's kind of the hypothesis in this conversation. If you can go to the next slide, please. Well, the first case is particularly interesting. This is a mine in a remote location in Central America. Well, most of the mines are in a remote location. We would love to have mines in close to airports or close to big hotels, right? But this is not an exception. But this particular mine is very remote. In the middle of the jungle, you can see the road to the mine there, just to give you an idea of how remote the mine is from a big town. From the nearest like hotel, it's 10 to 12 hours to the mine site by car. So it's really far away. And why I'm telling you this, because this is a result of the problem they have at the mine. They have this a nice, expensive analyzer installed at the process plant. They need to do the conditions of the process. They need to do maintenance regularly, every 4 to 6 months. This is paid by the mine. But the problem is that these remote locations make it hard for the technical team of the analyzer supplier to be at the mine consistently, right? So there's a problem because they have a huge amount of downtime with the analyzer. And when the analyzer is down, they simply change to the traditional method of silver nitrate. Obviously, the results from the analyzer versus the silver nitrate titration have a great variation. And at this location, they have a high turnaround. It's a region that it's starting to be popular in the mining industry. So the people are changing from mine to mine. So there's a huge turnaround at the mine. And well, they need to provide regular training to refresh the method to operators, right? Well, the solution is obviously the ready and easy to use CyanoGuard technology and minimal, almost no maintenance needed. As you know, well, the ones that know the technology know that it's very easy to use. It requires minimal training, and they won't have the problem on the maintenance and the downtime piece. Benefits of using the CyanoGuard technology is reduction of cost. They will save all the cost associated to do the maintenance and pay for this service to the supplier of the analyzers every 4 to 6 months. They will have this consistency in the cyanide analysis results. This is consequence of using the same method every time with the CyanoGuard solution. And the other thing is minimal training for operators, as I mentioned before. It's easy to use and mitigates the high turnover at this specific location. So if you can go to the second case, please. So this second case is a mine located in northern Mexico. For the ones that are aware of the climate there, it can get pretty hot in summer. We had the the luck to be there at the summer, and what we were doing at that moment was that they collected sample for the different points in the process from the rich pond solution, from the heap leaches, from the carbon plant, and they brought all these samples to the lab, to the laboratory. So we were doing the demonstration to show the benefits versus the traditional method they used, the silver nitrate titration. And we were processing the samples. We didn't know which sample was of which location. So because they were skeptic about it. So we didn't kind of know the ranges of operations. So we were processing the samples, and then a sample that we later knew that was from an environmental environmental yeah, from the interliner of the heap leach that shouldn't have cyanide, had a significant amount of cyanide. We tested with the cyanograph analyzer, and it showed a pretty significant amount of cyanide. They started to get worried and say, no, that is not true. Your analyzer doesn't work. And we did a second test with the analyzer and with that solution, and it showed the same amount of cyanide. Then they start to get really worried. They call by radio the guys from the environment area and say, hey, you should come to see this. We might have a problem. And at that point, Hector, my colleague, and I were like pretty like, oh, what's going on? What's happening, right? And then they mentioned, okay, third time, go, they say to one of the laboratory personnel, go and do a silver nitration, silver titration with this sample. And it showed the same amount of cyanide that we were showing in the cyanogram. So we find out that the operator that collected all the samples didn't want to go as far as, as that specific point. So he just took the sample from the rich solution point, right? Then those are the photos in the right. We show, okay, part of the benefit of, or the unique characteristics, features of the cyanogram is you can have this GPS tracking of where the sample is being analyzed. So you can take actually the lab with you and do the sample on site. It not only shows the benefit on having this personnel management, that they take the sample where they are supposed to take the sample and in the time where they are supposed to take the sample, but it also like gives these advantages of not having to deal with all this sample preservation that in cyanide solutions are pretty important to have a good result. So in the photos in the right, you can see, we say, okay, let's got it. Let's go to the field and do this demonstration on the field. So in the photo in the right up, we're in the rich solution pond, and the photo down, we are in the carbon plant. So it was a pretty interesting experience because the mines the guys at the mine were pretty worried. So, but well, we find out that the operator didn't do the job how it was supposed to be done. So the third case, if you can go for the next slide. So this is a particular mine also because it has 4 different sources of ore. Each one with different characteristics. They have a big stockpile, as most of the mines do have, but they mix that together. They don't have, they didn't have a good process of splitting the ore with high copper, so they just mix that together in the stockpile. Right? As I mentioned, they have ore with significant amount of other elements besides gold. They even mentioned at the mine, they don't know why they are a gold mine if they have between 600 to 1,500 parts per million of copper. They also have zinc, lead, iron, and obviously silver. It's a, you can say, new mine. At the beginning, when they're starting construction, they approach multiple cyanide online analyzers. None of them was able to properly analyze the samples. This due to the high amount of interferences they have because of the metals, right? Or just as a reference on the periodic table on the right, you can see which elements are commonly associated with gold ores, and most of them causes interferences in the analysis methods. More, some more than others, but you have interferences at some point if you don't have an only gold deposit, and that's, well, not easy thing to find, right? What they were doing is, what they are doing right now is they are determining the cyanide, the free cyanide available by a modified picric acid method. This method is pretty complicated. It takes about 4 to 6 hours to calculate, not determine, to calculate the free cyanide available. So what they do is they calculate, like in general, they calculate the watt cyanide, and then they determine the watt cyanide, and then they, with the copper content, they kind of determine the copper, the free cyanide in the process. But this method takes between 4 to 6 hours. It's a pretty big mine. And as I say, they have multiple ore sources. So they have peaks of copper mainly. So the changes in the process are pretty drastic. So there was a big opportunity to improve their process, right? We came out with the CyanoGuard solution, and well, it presented the following advantages for them. The first one is that it is fast. The sample, from taking the sample to analyzing it takes no more than 10 minutes. And most of that time is just to go to the measuring point, because the mine is pretty big. The tanks are large tanks. So it's fast, right? This this is an advantage for them, because with the current method, 4 to 6 hours, you cannot take decisions, right? When you have the data, it already passed 4 hours of slurry in the process plant. So if you need to do some modifications in the parameters of the process, you have, on one hand, you were overdosing cyanide, and on the other hand, you were underdosing cyanide, right? The second benefit for them is that it's a reliable solution, right? The elements, the multiple cyanide solutions that we tested weren't a problem for the CyanoGuard technology. So this gave them good confidence for them, because it matched the results that they were having, but the advantage that it was fast. And the other thing is it's portable, so they need to analyze multiple points, not only at the plant, but at the tailings facility and at the detox plant. So with the same device, you can do the analysis of with the same device, you can do the analysis of multiple points in the plant, right? So the benefits, and this is just an estimate of what we expect to confirm with the mine in a couple of months, is if they are overdosing cyanide, and we can reduce the cyanide they use by 5%, it's a savings of $5,500 per day. That gives us around 2 million per year. This is only in cyanide cost. There are other costs associated in this particular mine: detox agents, anti-crusting. They have another technology that causes additional cost. So this is just in cyanide cost. And if they're underdosing of cyanide, and we can increase the recovery by 2%, that sounds kind of aggressive, but it's doable. It's a benefit of around 20 millions per year, right? This is just in revenue of extra gold. And obviously this system of data cloud storage makes easier for shift changes and have the data available 24/7 for supervisors and managers. As I said, we are currently working with the mine site to run a full pilot test at the processing plant and confirm the full potential we have described. If you can go to the next slide, please. Well, as closing comments, to have a robust control procedures and reliable technologies are key to optimize your processing plants. As I mentioned before, the more complex oil deposits are being developed right now. The easy gold is being depleted. So we will have more and more challenge in the cyanide analysis. So having a robust and reliable method is key also to run the operations, not only to optimize them, but to run the operations. And CyanoGuard, on our experience, represents a reliable, easy to use and cost-effective alternative versus current cyanide analysis methods and online analyzers. And well, the benefits of the CyanoGuard technology, as I described it, are unique. And will be happy to continue to collaborate with technologies as CyanoGuard to design tailor-made solutions to our customers and help them excel their operations, right? So that's it from my side. Thank you very much. Hope it was usable, these three cases. And if you have any other comments, please ask them in the question or write me or the CyanoGuard team an email. I hand over back to you, Benedict.
Thank you very much, Luis. I found it really interesting the case, and some of them I was present myself, and it's very nice, to hear also like your experience from these testing. And with that, I would like to hand over to our mining solutions expert, Margarita, who will give you a quick overview of our technology.
Thank you, Benedict. Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. Luis has just spoken about the issues faced by the gold miners when trying to take cyanidation process under control, and also how CyanoGuard's solution helps them in achieving this. From my side, I would like to briefly share with you what you need to do if you want to start using our technology. First of all, we would need to receive some technical inputs from your side in order to customize our product to your requirements. In particular, this includes measurement frequency and cyanide concentration ranges to be measured. Secondly, as probably with any new product or service, it would make sense to define your key metrics and objectives to evaluate the performance of our solution. We recommend that you consider reliability and user-friendliness, as well as such important quantitative parameters as impact on cyanide consumption, gold recovery, and detox reagent costs if the latter is applicable to your process. Our existing clients report significant improvements in those variables attributable to much higher accuracy and reliability of our solution versus the existing alternatives currently predominant in the gold sector. Annual savings reported by those of our clients who use our technology for more than 1 year range from 2.5 to 8 million US dollars, and we know for sure this is not the limit. So the results for 2020 will definitely be more impressive, particularly that we've added some larger mines to our portfolio. And implementation of our solution is very easy, fast, and not linked to any complications traditionally accompanying such projects. It doesn't require capital investment, alterations of the production process, or highly skilled personnel to do the measurements. You do not even have to trust our solution up front. You can simply try it and see how it impacts your operational performance before you decide either to implement it full scale. That's it from my side for today. Thank you for your attention, and please do not forget to post your questions, which we will aim to answer during the forthcoming Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Margarita. It's very good. We already received a few questions, and I would like to start with a question for you, Luis, first. So I think it was on your first slide that you showed, the DNA of Chemours, and the question is, what makes Chemours different to other cyanide suppliers? Maybe you could highlight that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I hope to answer that correctly, and the marketing team doesn't give it hard to me. I think the first thing is the team, like the DNA, the mindset we have at the team. it's the main focus of my area, this technical account representative, is to be with the customer, understand their needs, but also their priorities, because we have encountered that cyanide analysis is something critical for most of the mines. But for example, when we approach them, maybe it's not the right time because they have other priorities. So we need to focus on the priorities and the needs the mine have. So I think that's the first thing, and the second thing is because cyanide suppliers, there's a bunch of cyanide suppliers, right? But kind of our mindset of delivering more value per ton of cyanide is what our customers are happy with, because we don't want to sell like a lot of quantities of cyanide. We want to sell the correct amount of quantities of cyanide to our customer. And these efforts that we are doing to work with our customers and to optimize their operations, not only in the cyanide piece, but also other areas where we have expertise. As I say, we are a chemical company and we have pretty good experience running chemical plants. It's valuable for our customers. So this mindset of, okay, I will deliver you more value per ton of cyanide is also what makes us different for other suppliers. Mm-hmm. I think you're on mute, Benedict.
Thank you very much, Luis. Thank you very much for I think it was a really good answer, because it's also something that we've experienced, that how Chemours is different, and something I think very important that you mentioned is sort of this focus on getting the most value per ton of cyanide. And I think the next question would be like, in your opinion, what are the three main ways how gold mines can improve their value per ton of cyanide, maybe in addition to better cyanide monitoring?
Yeah, three ways. I will start on our experiences. We need to review the basics of the plants, right? And one of a basic thing is the cyanide analysis. We are seeing a lot of opportunity there to implement a robust cyanide control system, and this obviously drives one, the cost down if you're overdosing cyanide, and the second one, if you can increase your recoveries if you're underdosing cyanide, well, that's great for the mine. So I would say instead of three, I would say one. We need to focus with our customers in the basics. Start with the basics, and then eventually the other projects and the other priorities will come. And one of the basics is obviously cyanide analysis, and not only cyanide, but other key reagents in the process plants, adequate levels of pH, for example. So that's the other thing on the processing plant piece.
Thank you very much. And I think it's, next to cyanide is definitely sort of the pH, but also, for example, the dissolved oxygen and the other, key drivers of the, gold cyanidation equation. And one more question, because, it's not always easy to implement a new technology. We have both seen that. So in your opinion, or, maybe from your experience, what are the major barriers to adopting novel technologies in gold mining operations, for example, CyanoGuard solution?
Yeah, I think the skepticism behind it, because if you do a little change in a processing plant, the result will be big, right? If it's a good result, you have big benefits. If it's a bad result, obviously there are bad benefits. So this testing phase of making the guys at the operation comfortable with the solution, like, okay, we will, and that's kind of the going back to the first question, is that's like the value we bring, and we see with our commercial partners as CyanoGuard, this we work hand with hand with the customers, so they trust the technology, and they trust that we are not trying to sell just another solution that won't be beneficial, right? So this phase of testing and kind of giving them the confidence that the solution works, I think that's the main barrier. This is understandable, because as I mentioned, that if you do a little change in the processing plant, the result will be multiplied by 1,000, right? That's because of the processing capacity they have, right? But like they see the value of the technology since the very first beginning, because of the reliability and other unique features. But the value is shown since the beginning, but kind of making them trust this trusting curve, we call it. It's kind of the most difficult part. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you also answered sort of like my follow-up question, like how these barriers can be mitigated. And I think building trust by testing and piloting is something that has proven very beneficial. And of course, understanding the barrier is key, because, as you said, a very small change can be very, very bad or very, very good. And we want to prove that it can be very good. Well, we still have a couple more questions to go. So the next one, I think, is best, Margarita, if you would like to answer it. Where has the technology been used so far?
In the mining setting, our technology has been used at various mines globally, in particular in the Americas, in Northern Europe, in Australia. And besides, also almond manufacturers in Spain and chemical factories here in Switzerland are relying on our solutions to monitor cyanide levels in raw almonds and or effluent waters, respectively.
Thank you very much. And then we have another, I think, is a really great question, like how long it would take to prove the value of it. I maybe start with a quick estimate from my own experience, then Luis, Margarita, you can chip in if you have anything to add, is how long it takes to prove the value of it. I think of course the value that was mentioned in the presentation by Luis and by Margarita, they are for very specific mines, and they are obviously calculated for a year, but usually you can see an impact and a change within a couple of weeks. So I think in about 4 to 6 weeks, you can already see an impact on the efficiency of the operation. Margarita, Luis, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think also the value piece is different for each mine, because we in Chemours say that each mine has different ore characteristic, and so it's a different business case, right? So you can see in the 3 different examples that the needs were different. In one of the cases, we didn't even knew that the GPS tracking was going to bring them value. And for example, in the 3 case, the value that brought was instantly, right? When they saw that they have 4 to 6 hours to have the solution, the cyanide analysis number, to 10 minutes, they were like very excited, right? So I would say it will depend mine to mine. In Chemours, it's the strategy is let's talk about your needs, let's test the technology, right? So that's what I wanted to add.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That and also like how I experienced, like when I was on site, that the value can be very different, but the key values usually amortize in a very short time. So it's not like you have to build up a big plant and then maybe only after you invest a high amount of funds that you can see any returns, like quite immediate, and everything is reversible. So it's not like you have committed to that and then you need to stick with this as for the next 10 years. The next question is if there is a system available with a slurry sampling system for process control in a leach or a CL circuit. So I'm just going to add something there, and then Margarita, Luis, please feel free to answer. So the technology in its basic form can take slurry solutions up to 60% weight of total dissolved solids. So it would work natively without any modifications in a leach or in a carbon leach slurry. Luis, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, we have tested the slurry solutions with high amount of solids, below 60%, as you mentioned, and it works fine. So I don't see a problem there.
Very good. And the next question is about, our next developments, if whether there is an online automated version of the technology under development. And yes, there is. We expect that we have a first prototype in the middle of next year. Our research and development team is working on that. Of course, we see that a lot of value is provided by the mobility and the flexibility of our current solution. This is where we would like to focus on this solution first, but we see that in some cases, especially when you move further upstream towards the dosing, an automated analyzer might make a lot of sense. And coupled with our new technology, which is inherently different from existing automated analyzers, we believe we can even serve the minds even better than with just this one portfolio. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think this question was answered, and there's one final, there's just another one came in. Two final questions. So first is what our experience in Peru is. We have done a few pilots in Peru, and we also have a collaboration with someone in Peru. If you would like to know more about this, I would recommend you to get in touch with our Mining Solutions team. You'll find the email address in the registration. Or it's simply mining.solutions@zynaguard.com, and we can, share more info about that with you. And the last answer before we wrap up is about the analysis range and whether what kind of cyanide species are measured and whether there's any calibration required. So for the analysis range, we can really customize that. There's also most beneficial if you just get in touch with us to see about your individual range. I know that Luis and Hector, you've been using it on different concentrations and it worked well. Not sure if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, we have tried it with multiple concentrations, lower concentration as 2 parts per million for environmental applications, and up to 600, 800 parts per million for processing plants. So the range it's wide, right? And as you mentioned, well, we have talked about this project that they have more than 1,000 ppms of cyanide, and we're working on that. So it works fine at multiple concentrations of cyanide.
Yeah, that's also something that we have been. What you mentioned, I think one of your first slides, you said, the cyanide consumption is going up, and there's more cyanide consumed. And what we've seen is that they're, in the processes, that there are higher cyanide concentration usual. So especially in the tank-based leaching processes, use significantly more than in a heap leach-based ones. And we're also working on deploying a new solution which can handle even higher concentrations, up to several thousand ppm. Okay. It's still under development, so we don't want to overpromise anything, but we hope we can unveil a prototype in the first half of next year.
Excited to know more about those two.
Yeah, we're also very excited. We have one pilot coming up with that technology, but we still need to finalize the testing. And then there are two last parts of that question. So the first is whether we measure what and free. At the moment, we only measure free cyanide, which is most relevant one for the process control. There is also a prototype underway. Will probably be more towards the second half of the year for WAD. And for the calibration, that's something that comes up in all of our webinars. So all the calibration is done here at our facilities in Switzerland. They come pre-calibrated, so you don't need to calibrate them because the devices have an integrated standard that they always benchmark against, and therefore also eliminate sensor drift. And what we do is we regularly replace the analyzers, so you always have an updated and calibrated version to use. I think with that, that was our last question. I would like to thank all of the participants that took the time to ask some questions, and we hope we answered them. If you have any more questions, please feel free to get in touch either with us here at Cyanogard or with Luis directly. We'll share the recording of the webinar in the following days as usual. And with that, I would like to thank Luis for taking the time and having such a nice presentation and sharing your experience, and also Margarita for giving us more insight into how to work with the Cyanogard technology.
Thank you very much, Margarita. Thank you, Benedict, for the opportunity, and appreciate all the people that attended the webinar.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to conclude the webinar today. This will be our last webinar for this year. So hope I'll see most of you in our webinar in the new year. And with that, I would already wish you, happy holidays and a good start into the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.